He served as a senior vice president and general counsel, chief compliance officer at American Airlines and AMR Corporation from 2003 to 2014. He guided the airline through two of its most high-profile events in the company's history, the 2011 bankruptcy filing and also the merger in 2013 with U.S. Airways. He was very important in that as to obtain government approval for the merger, and also was called upon to testify in front of Congress to garner support for that merger. Gary, as general counsel, managed the company's legal affairs worldwide, including complex commercial litigation, employment litigation, labor union disputes, and corporate transactions. Before that, Gary was the vice president of real estate and construction at American Airlines, and in that role was the chief strategist for leasing and construction of the company's many airport facilities, maintenance facilities, and office buildings worldwide. Now, Gary serves as a member of the board of PIMCO Funds, one of the country's largest open-end fund complexes, where he is a member of the Audit and Governance Committee. He also serves on the board of Marconi Group, a patent management company here in Dallas, Texas, and he has served as an adjunct professor of the law at Southern Methodist University and Texas Wesleyan University. He is the author of a new book published in February 2018 titled 12 Years of Turbulence, The Inside Story of American Airlines Battle for Survival. Book's out in our hallway, and they'll be around afterwards for you to buy it and for him to sign it for you if you'd like. Before arriving at American, Kennedy was a litigator and bankruptcy attorney in Salt Lake City. He is a 1977 magna cum laude graduate of the University of Utah. He's also a member of Phi Beta Kappa. He received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Utah School of Law in 1980. Kennedy and his wife have 4 children and live in Dallas, Texas. I am proud to introduce to you our friend Gary Kennedy.
Well, thank you, David. It is a distinct pleasure to be with you today. As David indicated, I served with American Airlines for many years, particularly as general counsel during the last 11 years of my career there, during what was really the crisis-laden years at American Airlines. But during my years, I would attend functions like this frequently, or a cocktail reception. And whenever I would do that, people, as soon as they learn that you're with an airline, they immediately want to tell you about their latest adventure in flight. And there's something about it, it's like a magnet. And people would, of course, tell me about their canceled flight, their delayed flight. They'll tell me about their lost baggage. And as they would recite the story, I'd be inclined to say, and sometimes I would, look, this is a venture that takes place at 35,000 feet, so 7 miles above the surface of the earth, going 600 miles an hour, thousands of times a day, and you want to tell me that your bag was delayed. And I would tell them that 99.8% of all luggage arrives at its destination as promised. Now, I know many of you are thinking, how did I end up in that 0.2%? I get it. I've been there too, but nevertheless, it's an accurate statistic. The complaint letters that I would receive as general counsel, just, from all sorts of walks of life. On one occasion in particular, I recall that an individual, an attorney, he wrote me an email. He was desperate. And he said, I've arrived at my destination wedding with my fiance, and one of our bags did not arrive as promised. And I absolutely need you to find this bag for me. And I said, of course, what's in the bag? And he said, his wife's wedding dress. And I thought to myself, there's 3 things you never put in checked luggage. 1 is medication, 2 is jewelry, and 3rd has got to be a wedding dress. And I'm the attorney. I'm thinking, well, how am I going to find your bag? But I put out the word, and when the word comes out from the chief lawyer, find this bag, People sort of pay attention to it. And so we have this entire system looking for this piece of luggage. And in fact, the luggage is found and delivered the day before their wedding. And I don't know whether this couple is living happily ever after or not, but I do know that they are loyal American Airlines customers as a result of finding that lost piece of luggage. When I left American Airlines at the end of 2013, I said to my wife that I wanted to write a book about the crises that took place at American Airlines after 9/11. And she looked at me, she's also a lawyer, and she said, that is a terrible idea. She said, you've got so much confidential information and so much things covered by the attorney-client privilege that just forget it. And I said, no, I really want to write this book. And so I said, the first thing I need is a title. And she said, once again, you're wrong. You don't need a title. What you need is to try to write this book then if you insist. But I persisted and said, help me here with a title. And she's a very clever woman. So she went away, and 2 hours later, she came back to me and said, I've got it. She said, why don't we analogize the title of the book to the status of our marriage and call it 12 Years of Turbulence? Well, I wasn't particularly pleased by the way she came with the title, but I liked the title, and it stuck. So the next thing I had to do was to find someone to help me with the book. So I asked Terry Maxson, who had just recently retired from the Dallas Morning News. He had been there for 30 years. He was the aviation writer, covered American Airlines intensely. And so I asked him, and he said yes. And so the next step was to start writing. And so Terry and I had an agreement. I would try to write 1 to 2 chapters each month until the project was finished. Terry would take those chapters, do all the research, and he would then edit the book and provide writing himself. And I would sit in the Dallas Public Library in Preston Center, was where I found it would be quiet and a place where I wouldn't be disturbed, and we pounded out this book and got it published. This book is a book about the events that took place inside our company that people haven't heard about after the events of 9/11 for the next 12 years. And it is an extraordinary set of crises that enveloped this company, which was the world's largest airline. To give you a sense of the drama that took place inside the company, I want to show you a 90-second promotional video that we put together in connection with for these presentations and to publicize the book. So with your indulgence, let me show you this quick video. We lost $1 billion in 1 quarter alone. That's over $30 million a day. And so we knew we had to do something to save this company.
5527, runway 8 kilo, you're clear for takeoff.
I remember my wife saying to me, was that your plane? And I said no. Like if I said no, it wouldn't be true, even though I knew at the very soul of myself that it was our plane.
From 9/11 through the close of the merger, it really was a roller coaster.
The airline industry as a whole has seemingly lurched from crisis to crisis, beginning with the horrific events of September 11.
Literally, successful airlines are going out of business.
We realized we had a very serious liquidity crisis.
We were going to prepare for bankruptcy without telling anyone of our plans. The night before, did anyone, Terry Maxson and the Dallas Morning News, find out?
This is undoubtedly the biggest story of my career.
All hell was going to break loose after we filed.
Before this is over, someone's going to have to fall on their sword.
We were literally on the steps of the bankruptcy court as we made the decision not to file.
After 81 years of flying,
is going to have wide-reaching effects here. How employees must be feeling about this.
retirees are concerned, and they should be.
It was traumatic for our employees.
The U.S. government, Department of Justice, sued American.
What happens if the DOJ prevails and blocks your merger? Where do you go from there?
Lives and livelihoods were at stake. So, with the time we have available, I want to tell you just a few pieces of the beginning of this story, and then provide a few minutes for questions as well. This story that we tell in this book really opens up on the morning of 9/11. On that morning, at approximately 7:15 in the morning Central Time, American Airlines received a telephone call. That call was on a cell phone, and the cell phone was placed by a flight attendant who was in the rear of Flight 77. That flight had departed Boston that morning on its way to Los Angeles. And when she placed that phone call, the call was placed into our reservation center in Raleigh, North Carolina. And when that call was received, it was then patched through to our System Operation Control Center in Dallas-Fort Worth. And this woman, by the name of Betty Ong, she was a flight attendant and was in the rear of the aircraft. And she reported that 3 men had stabbed 2 of the flight attendants, and also reported to us that 1 first-class passenger had also been stabbed and killed. She went on to tell us that these 3 men had made their way into the cockpit of the airplane. She reported these incidents to us in a professional manner, despite the enormous stress that was taking place on board that aircraft. This was the first official notification that we had about what was happening on board that aircraft. And she stayed on the phone with us until, unfortunately, the line went dead as that aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center building. A second aircraft of Americans, Flight 11, crashed into the Pentagon building. And on that same morning, a United Airlines flight crashed into the second tower of the World Trade Center, and a second aircraft of United crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That event was so extraordinary for this country, and an event that was extraordinary for American Airlines because of the emotional toll it took to lose the aircraft, the people, members of the American Airlines family. And the financial results were likewise so extraordinary because the air transportation system was shut down entirely. And when it finally reopened, very few people wanted to fly on our aircraft. And as a result, we were losing, starting with hundreds of millions of dollars and then billions of dollars as a result of that incident. But for American Airlines, the bad news didn't stop there, because just 2 months later, on the morning of November 12, one of the American Airlines planes, Flight 587, was scheduled to depart from John F. Kennedy International Airport on its way to Santo Domingo. And on that morning, it was one of those classic mornings for flying. It was a cool morning. There was a light breeze, slightly overcast, but everything was in great shape. And as the captain and the first officer made their way to the end of the taxiway and preparing for takeoff, they received a transmission from the Air Traffic Control Center. And Air Traffic Control told them that they needed to be mindful of wake turbulence after they took off. And the reason for that is that a Japan Airlines 747, a large aircraft, was departing immediately before them. And so the concern was that there would be wake turbulence as they took off into that wake. And our pilots acknowledged that call, and they actually had a conversation among themselves saying, how much separation will there be between our aircraft and the JAL aircraft? And so then they began to make their takeoff roll down the runway. And as they did that, they took off, and they got to about 2,300 feet. And the captain, who was not flying the aircraft that morning, the first officer was flying, which is often the case, he made a transmission to the Air Traffic Control Center. And he said, in his words, these are in airline parlance, he said, clean machine. And that means that the slats had been retracted and that the landing gear had been retracted. And so things were proceeding as they should. And just seconds after that, he made a remark to the first officer. He asked him, how are things? Are things okay? And the first officer said, yes, things are fine. Unfortunately, at that time, things were not fine on board that aircraft, because as the first officer encountered the wake turbulence from the JAL aircraft, he made a series of rudder inputs to stabilize the aircraft because it was having this movement. And so he entered one after another of rudder inputs to stabilize the aircraft. And in doing so, it placed tremendous pressure on the tail of the aircraft. And so that tail of the aircraft separated from the aircraft, and it crashed into Bell Harbor, New York. And all 260 people on board the aircraft were killed, along with 5 people on the ground. When the aircraft crashed, you can imagine, just 2 months after 9/11, everyone believed that this was another terrorist event. And so because of that, Mayor Giuliani, who was mayor of New York at that time, he closed all of the bridges and tunnels leading into the city. The next thing he did is he got into a helicopter to view the wreckage. And as he was flying over Jamaica Bay, he placed a telephone call to our CEO, Don Carty. And he said, "Mr. Carty, I'm looking at the wing of the aircraft lying in Jamaica Bay." And Mr. Carty said, "No, Mr. Mayor, that is not the wing of the aircraft." He said, "That's the tail of the aircraft." By that time, we knew this was not a terrorist event. And I tell you that story as well because it puts into place the dramatic effect that these two events had on American Airlines. When I was writing the book, I sat down with Don Carty, who had been a long time both friend as well as colleague, and I asked him, what did you think at that time would happen to American Airlines? And he said he did not believe that American could continue as a going concern after those events because the emotional and the financial turmoil was simply too great. Within a year after 9/11, now we're talking about just a little bit over a year, by January 2003, American Airlines was basically insolvent. We had run through virtually every bit of cash in the company's coffers. And an airline takes enormous amounts of cash to remain in business. And so as the airline was basically insolvent and facing bankruptcy, Don Carty came to me. I was at that time running the real estate and construction group at American. And he came to me and asked me if I wanted to be general counsel of the airline. And I thought to myself, well, let's see. We're out of money. We're going to file for bankruptcy. And I hadn't practiced law in over 10 years. I said, what could possibly go wrong with this offer? But I immediately said yes. And I said yes because I had desperately wanted to be general counsel of this airline and had been telling anyone who would listen that that's the job I wanted. The timing wasn't perfect, but I said, okay, great. And when Don asked me that question, to be general counsel, we were seated in his office. And his office, it's a corner office, and it looks over an expanse of pasture land. And then we could see the planes arriving and departing at DFW. And at that time, he said to me, asked me a question that I should have paid more attention to at the time. He asked me whether as general counsel, I could stand up to him in difficult times and tell him things that he didn't want to hear and tell him things that things he could not do. And I said, sure, I can do that. And what I didn't know at that time was that those words were going to come back and haunt me terribly about 2 to 3 months following. After Don asked me and I became general counsel, he told me that I had one job to do, my first job. He said, is to put this company into bankruptcy. And he said, we're going to put it into bankruptcy on April 15, 2003. We're going to tell the world that's what we're going to do. He said there was only one way that we would avoid bankruptcy. He said if he could convince our labor unions to give us $1.8 billion a year in concessions, we won't file. So he said, look, you go prepare for bankruptcy. I'll try to convince the unions to give us this money, and let's see what happens. So as that date got close, all three unions, we have three unions at American Airlines, all three unions had to vote in favor. And I was standing in an elevator, next to an elevator, in a high-rise in New York City with the attorneys. We had boxes stacked almost to the ceiling, boxes ready to go to the bankruptcy court. We had limousines waited down on Fifth Avenue to run us to the bankruptcy court. Well, the call came through that 2 out of our 3 unions said yes, and the 3rd union said no. The flight attendants said no. We then made a decision to give them 1 more day to re-vote, and they re-voted. They said yes. And everyone in the room was happy, except a few of us, because a few of us knew that that was not the end of the story. Because the very next day, we were going to make a disclosure in a public filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And that filing was to reveal that officers of the company, myself included, were set to receive millions of dollars in stock and bonuses as a result of being willing to stay through this difficult period of time. Now, I hope you're all asking, how in the world could you, as general counsel, and could the company, ask employees for almost $2 billion a year and give ourselves millions of dollars in return? And it's an excellent question, one that we debated at length in advance of this vote by the unions. When the filing was made the very next day, you've never seen a group of employees as angry and as upset, believing they'd been lied to, they'd been deceived, while they give money that the officers were lining their pockets with gold and silver. It was an extraordinarily difficult time, one that ultimately led to the departure and resignation of Don Carty from that office, despite the fact that he came to me and other officers of the company and said, hey, we have to solve this problem, and one way to solve that problem is I need to claw back these payments. And he called me on a Saturday morning, and I knew what the call was about, and I said, of course, absolutely. And when I got off the phone, my wife asked me, what was that about? I said, well, you know, Don Carty just asked for all this money that was going to be paid, not to be paid. And she remarked, that was a really expensive phone call. And she said, if he calls back, don't answer the phone. I don't have time to tell you this balance. I've given you a little snippet of a story. And what ensued thereafter was a series of crises at the company as we tried to put the company back together and to survive over the next many years. And ultimately culminating in the bankruptcy of American Airlines in 2011, an agreement to merge our company with U.S. Airways in 2013, followed by the United States government suing to enjoin that merger, and ultimately ending up with American Airlines once again being both the largest airline in the world as well as an extremely profitable airline. I would like to leave, I know I'm going to be very cognizant of the time today. I want to leave time for questions. And if you don't have any questions, however, I'm going to tell you a couple other stories. So maybe you would have a couple of questions. But before I do that, I do want to do one thing. Despite the fact that my daughter will be out in the foyer peddling books, let's do a book giveaway right now. And I'm going to ask you one question. You can shout out the answer. Whoever gets this closest, free book, fully signed by 2 authors as well. Okay, so what percentage of people who fly in American Airlines, of all the people who fly in American Airlines, what percentage fly only one time a year? Yes, sir. 51%. Other guesses, please. Bunch of guesses, and then we'll... 70%. 35, 40. I feel like an auctioneer. This is pretty cool. 65. 5. 80. Okay. Wow. Very aggressive there, sir. Anyone else? Okay, we'll stop this torture. Okay. This gentleman is the closest. 87% of the people who fly in American Airlines fly once a year. And for all of you who fly a lot, you say, how could that possibly be? Which is why the TSA lines get so messed up, because people don't know what they're doing, because they're flying once a year. It's an extraordinary number. I will leave this book here for you, sir. Now, happy to answer questions. I know I gave you a very short shrift of this story. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm a workout and turnaround guy in the middle markets, and we've always faced that kind of problem with employees, so we generally structure it only as a success fee. If everybody doesn't get out, we don't get any extra money. We're well paid, but we don't get anything extra. Has that been considered?
Lots of different of options were considered about how that workout should be. What was put in place was to provide both cash as well as a supplemental pension payment of $45 million. But here's the key. Don Carty told labor leaders, I've got to do something to keep my senior people at the company. He didn't go far enough and tell them what it was, but he also believed that had we told people in advance of this vote, they would have voted it down. And he desperately wanted to avoid bankruptcy. He said, I will solve this afterwards. I, along with the CFO, said, oh my gosh, this is going to be turmoil. We've got to tell them in advance. And he said, you're leading with your chin. Of course, then we may as well just file for bankruptcy. So it was a very difficult situation, and one that did not turn out as, unfortunately, as he expected. Yes, there was another question. Yes, sir.
So I admit I'm sort of a skeptic of government actions. My question is, were there any government actions that you think contributed that just didn't really make sense.
Government plays an enormous role with airlines. But we were one of the most overregulated companies, or industries rather, anywhere. But I can't say that their regulations contributed really harshly to our problem was our labor costs were simply too high and revenue was simply too low. It was a terrible mix. That mix has now been largely solved, but at that time, that was another problem. It was labor costs that were just really, not making the airline to be able to be profitable.
Why did you let your labor costs get so high?
Well, that is a darn good question. We've been fighting with labor ever since I joined the airline. Bob Crandall couldn't solve it, and no one could since that time. And it is a vexing problem that's always with an airline. Yes, sir.
If you break down labor, capital in your airplane, things like that, and fuel, how would that break down? The way you're talking, the most expensive thing is labor, but there's got to be billions and billions of dollars
Yes,
invested in capital.
absolutely. If you put aside the question of a really large spike in fuel prices, when fuel prices spike, it's the largest component of an airline's cost. But if you normalize for that a little bit, it's going to be about 30 to 40% is going to be labor costs, another 30% is going to be fuel, and then the balance of it. So labor costs are a huge component, and of course with an airline, you have to invest billions of dollars in new aircraft. In fact, we signed the largest aircraft order in aviation history just a few months before we filed for bankruptcy. And it is so tremendous today because if you're flying, you'll notice most of the aircraft on American, brand new aircraft. Yes, sir. David.
Gary, you and I talked about the relationship between Republic Bank Dallas and American Airlines when y'all relocated from New York to Dallas. How important was that, do you think, in the history of American Airlines?
The move from American Airlines from New York to Dallas was one of the single best things that's ever happened to that airline. One, because much lower cost of doing business in Texas than it is in New York. Second, the employee base is sort of much more sort of adept than what we had in New York. And third, the fact that our hub in Dallas-Fort Worth is one, it's like Atlanta. It is the key to American success. Now, we've got about 8, the company now has about 7 hubs, but Dallas-Fort Worth is the economic engine that not only fuels American Airlines, but this entire region. So it's a tremendous move on the company's behalf. Yes. Yes, miss.
My dad is a retired pilot. His sister was before he and had a position in Miami at the time. Was a flight attendant. And when all of 9/11 went down. But she said it was very difficult the way that the flight attendants responded to once they heard that y'all didn't file the bankruptcy with them, that you were going to take a large amount of money, that money was borrowed to be able to pay that, and they had all those concessions. It really affected people that were flying for quite a while. What do you have to say about that, and how would you have funded the bonuses?
Well, the one thing just for factual, the money was not borrowed for the bonuses that were to be paid that were paid. It was all done in cash. And it affected pilots, flight attendants, ground workers tremendously. The difficult part in almost any business, but for an airline, is you pay the rank and file, to lack of a better word, the people on the front line, amount of money that is what the market will bear. But as we all know, executives at a company, like a sports figure, are paid tremendously at much higher levels. We had a serious, real problem at American. The reason I became general counsel, because the previous general counsel left the company at 9/11, after 9/11, one after another executive was leaving the company. And you cannot run a company without people, so it had to be something to get people to stay. And that was the mechanism used, right or wrong, that was the mechanism used to save that company. And the difficulty was, of course, never getting that full buy-in in advance of it being made public. Yes, sir, in the back? Yes. It's a small in terms of total percentage, in terms of what add-ons provide, but it is hundreds of millions of dollars, if not now eclipsing $1 billion. Because when we had these great discussions among the senior people of the company about doing that first bag fee that people now really hate, but it provides tremendous amounts of money. Because if people want to bring that stuff, then our view is, they need to pay more for it. And it's not just this free-for-all where you could just bring unlimited amounts of stuff with you, to get on a plane. But it's significant, but it's not significant in the overall percentage. Yes?
Years ago, Bob Crandall addressed this club when he was the CEO of American. And the gist of his talk was the difficulties faced by the airline industry. Again, we're going back, what was that, 20 plus years ago? And how difficult it was for an airline to make money. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's always been too many airlines, but now because we have really got 4 major airlines in this country, the airline industry is stronger, and they should be profitable going forward. But there was too much fragmentation before and too much infighting. I mean, it's still a highly competitive industry, but that was the problem. It was too fragmented. And I know that our time is up, so I wanted to thank you all so much. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank you.
No, that was perfect, actually. Thank you all for great questions, too. And Gary, this is a presentation we have for you. This is our club's centennial history book, and we have invited our attendees today to sign this for you, just to let you know how much your presentation has impacted us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate you. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next week, are you guys ready to party? Yay, let's try that again. Come on. Next week, we will not have a lunch meeting. We will actually have our holiday cocktail party, and Courtney Underwood has agreed to host this in her home in Highland Park. So please plan to join us a week from tonight, December the 19th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Courtney Underwood's home. There will be a really fun cocktail party, signature cocktail. If y'all know what poinsettias are, that's our signature cocktail. It's delightful. Light bites, and all your friends from Rotary will be there. So please plan to come, and don't forget to RSVP. Bring a guest, bring a bottle of something you'd like to share, and if you'd like to do a special appetizer or something fun to eat, just let me know, and we'll accommodate that. But otherwise, we're going to provide some light bites for you. RSVPs are required. This is major, you guys. This is at someone's home, so we want to be able to provide enough food for everybody. So please do, if you haven't already RSVP'd, click on the email that you received where it says the holiday party. Click to RSVP. That way we know how many people that we're going to be feeding. So we look forward to having you all there, and you will look forward to being there too, because it's going to be fun. So after today, there are no more Rotary Club of Dallas meetings until January the 9th. So next week, no lunch, but cocktail party. We're all in agreement, right? The following week after that is Christmas week, so there's no club meeting on the 26th. And then the following week after that is the day after New Year's Day, so there's no club meeting on January the 2nd. We're going to make sure everybody has time to be with their families during these holidays. So like I said, our next meeting will be January the 9th, which will be our club assembly. And that is a perfect opportunity for me to invite President-elect Charles Dowden to come up to the front and tell us a little bit about what's going on with club assembly. Charles, this is your fan club here.
I get no respect. Just get no respect.
Get used to it. So come on up.
On your tables, you saw one of these for those of you who can read. And for those of you that have a cell phone that's not a flip phone, go wherever you get, this is called Club Runner. You want to get this on your phone. It's just a mirror of our own information on our website for the club. At the club assembly on the 9th, we're going to have a photographer there.
There's certain people we want to put toward the end, because if you're at the first, you'll probably break the camera. But we're going to put you, but anyway, if you don't have a picture, we want your pictures, as beautiful as you are, in the club directory, okay? Because I look around, start looking for, now who is, and there's no picture. And and there's people in here I want to know, but there's no picture. So do that. Get Club Runner, get that on, download, go to wherever you get your apps, download that, okay? Because Club Runner is the one that gets it done. You got it? Get it.
Thank you, Charles. Now, on a serious note, it is nearly the end of the second quarter of the Rotary year. Can you believe how fast time is flying? We must be having fun, because it is flying. So you should have all received an invoice last week for your quarterly or semi-annual dues if you haven't already paid in full. Having said that, please understand, and this is very serious, that at this point, if you have not made a payment on your account to be a member of this club and have made no contact with Hillary to make arrangements, your membership will be terminated on Saturday. So I hate to be the bad guy, but we have to be very strict about this. If you haven't paid your dues, we need to hear from you this week. At least let us hear from you. And we appreciate your prompt attention to this matter. If you have any questions or concerns, I am making myself available to any and every one of you who have questions about this. Our club is able to give back to our local and global community because of our amazing members, and you can't be a member if you don't pay your membership dues. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news for those of you who haven't paid, but let us hear from you and we will keep your membership in good standing, but we do need to get that resolved. Thank you. Now, let's have fun again. Thanks again to our members and guests for your attendance today. What an incredible presentation. I was sitting on the edge of my seat, reliving some of those painful moments of seeing those airplanes crash and tears welling up in my eyes just hearing the story that you guys went through at American Airlines. So thank you once again for sharing that story with us. And we are, as Rotarians, very privileged to have such amazing speakers such as yourself. It is indeed a privilege to be a Rotarian and a member of this club. And so while membership is by invitation only, someone thought very highly of you to invite you here today. So we hope you will consider joining us and inquire with them about being a member of the Rotary Club of Dallas. I look forward to seeing you all next week at the cocktail party. Please RSVP. Remember, no lunch next week. And in the meantime, continue to share the gift of Rotary, continue to be people of action, and continue to be the inspiration. Now, in closing, Rotarians, please stand and recite with me of the things we think, say, and do. First. Second. Third. Fourth. And at the Rotary Club of Dallas, we have a fifth. Yes, it is. We wish you all the very best of holidays. Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and Happy 2019. We are adjourned.